Determine the point estimate of the population proportion, the margin of error for the following confidence interval, and the number of individuals in the sample with the specified characteristic X for the sample provided. So, first of all, let's think about what a confidence interval actually looks like. So, a confidence interval, a couple different forms here. So, we have it as the lower bound, so I'm going to use LB to represent the lower bound, comma, the upper bound. Right? So that is our point estimate, which is P hat, plus and minus a margin of error. So the lower bound is the point estimate minus a margin of error, and the upper bound is the point estimate plus a margin of error. So if we think about this, right in the middle we have our point estimate, and then we go a certain distance to our bounds, and that distance is our margin of error. And then we reach our upper bound and our lower bound. So we're asked to find the point estimate. So we can find our point estimate simply by taking the average of our upper and lower bounds. So the point estimate here is going to be equal to the lower bound plus the upper bound divided by 2. So we're just taking the average of our two bounds there. So P hat, in this case, is equal to 0.556 plus 0.669 divided by 2. So if I type that all in my calculator one time, I want to put the top in parentheses. So remember order of operations, this would divide first and then add. So I need to put the numerator in parentheses so that it'll add those first. So parentheses 0.556 plus 0.669, close my parentheses, divided by 2. So our point estimate is 0.6125. So that number should always fall in between our upper and lower bound. The next thing we want to do is find our margin of error. So the margin of error is that distance between the point estimate and the upper bound, and the distance between the lower bound and the point estimate. So what we're going to do there is look at the difference between our bounds and then divide by 2. So our margin of error is the upper bound minus the lower bound divided by 2. So E is what we use for margin of error. So in that case it's going to be 0.669 minus 0.556 divided by 2. So again, we can type that in at one time. So parentheses 0.669 minus 0.556 close parenthesis divided by 2. So we get 0.0565. So if I were to take my point estimate there of 0.6125 and add 0.0565, I should get my upper bound, and I do. Or if I was to take my point estimate and subtract the margin of error, I should get the lower bound, and I do. Right? So the last thing we want to do is find the number of individuals in the sample with the specified characteristic X. So the formula for a point estimate is P hat is equal to X over N. Right? So let's plug in what we have here. So we know P hat here. Right? So we know that p hat is 0.6125, so we can plug that in there. And we know that n is 1,000, and we're looking for x, so we can plug that in there and solve for x. So let's do that. So p hat is 0.6125, we're looking for x, and n is 1,000. So if I multiply both sides by 1,000, I can solve for x. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 1,000. Squeeze that in here. Multiply by 1,000, so let's do 1,000 times 0.6125. So we get 61, 2.5 equals x. So that's the number of people that have that characteristic. So again, not exact, so just follow the directions that it tells you to round to there.